This is not just stone and brick, not just another building standing on the horizon. This is a mystery, a puzzle, a sacred place that millions of people around the world respect and honor. The Mormon Temple. But what is it really? And why does it hold such deep meaning for so many people? When the sun sets and the sky burns with the last colors of evening, and the camera slowly rises above a quiet city, there it stands, a shining white structure with tall towers reaching toward heaven. As if these ancient stones are whispering secret stories to the fading light, while soft, cinematic music grows louder in the background. Snow-covered mountains surround the Salt Lake Temple. Rome's ancient skyline shares space with a gleaming modern design. In the busy heart of Asia, another temple rises like a beacon of light. Every frame speaks of greatness, and yet of mystery. Are these temples just houses of worship? Or do they work as gateways, bridges that connect our earthly life to eternity? Every door, every stone, every symbol carved into these sacred walls tells a story that only those who enter inside can fully understand. The screen grows dim. Silence stays in the air. Then, with quiet intensity, the narrator continues. In this journey, we will uncover where these temples came from. We will explore the hidden ceremonies performed inside. We will witness the grandeur of their architecture, and we will face the controversies that surround them. The music grows louder, now darker, as the camera zooms in on the golden angel Moroni statue, his trumpet lifted toward heaven. But this is not just the story of buildings. This is the story of faith, of devotion, and of mysteries so sacred, or so secret, that they cannot be spoken out loud. The question is, are you ready to step inside? It all began here, in the early 1800s United States, a time of religious revival, of searching hearts, and of restless souls. America was young, the frontier was wild, and people were hungry for spiritual truth. From this restless landscape, one man emerged who claimed to have seen visions that would change history forever. His name was Joseph Smith Jr. Born in 1805 in Vermont, raised in New York, he was just a farm boy when he claimed that God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared to him in a grove of trees. This first vision, as it came to be known, would become the foundation stone of a new religion. To his followers, he was a prophet, chosen to restore Christ's church on earth after centuries of apostasy. To his critics, he was a radical dreamer, perhaps even a fraud. But one thing was certain. Joseph Smith started a movement that could not be stopped. The young prophet claimed that an angel named Moroni visited him repeatedly, revealing the location of golden plates buried in a hill near his home. These plates, Smith said, contain the record of ancient American civilizations and their encounters with Jesus Christ. He translated these plates into what became known as the Book of Mormon, published in 1830. That same year, on April 6th, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was officially organized with just 6 members. As the church grew, so did the need for a sacred gathering place. In 1833, while the saints were establishing themselves in Kirtland, Ohio, Joseph Smith received a revelation that would change everything. God commanded him to build a temple, not just a meeting house, but a house of the Lord where sacred ordinances could be performed. This was revolutionary. Unlike traditional Christianity, which saw temples as relics of the Old Testament, Smith taught that temples were essential for the fullness of the gospel. The Kirtland Temple took 3 years to build, from 1833 to 1836. It was modest by today's standards, just 2 large assembly rooms, one above the other. But it was revolutionary in its purpose. Here, for the first time in centuries, ancient ordinances would be restored. The dedication of the Kirtland Temple on March 27th, 1836, was marked by extraordinary spiritual manifestations. Members reported visions of angels, speaking in tongues, and appearances of Jesus Christ himself. This Pentecostal outpouring validated in the minds of believers that God had indeed accepted their offering. But this new faith faced fierce opposition almost from its beginning. The doctrine of continuing revelation, the practice of plural marriage, and the political power of united Mormon communities created fear and suspicion among their neighbors. Economic tensions arose as Mormon communities prospered and grew, often displacing earlier settlers. Religious prejudice ran deep. Many Christians viewed Mormonism as heretical, a dangerous departure from traditional Christianity. The persecution was not just theological, but physical and economic. In Missouri, Governor Lilburn Boggs issued Executive Order 44, known as the Extermination Order, declaring that Mormons must be exterminated or driven from the state. This led to violent conflicts, including the Horns Mill Massacre, where 17 Mormon settlers, including children, were killed by an anti-Mormon mob. Driven from Missouri, the Saints sought refuge in Illinois, where they founded the city of Nauvoo on the banks of the Mississippi River. Here they began their second great temple project. The Nauvoo Temple was to be grander than Kirtland, a magnificent limestone structure with a tower reaching 165 feet into the sky. But Nauvoo represented more than just architectural ambition. It was here that Joseph Smith fully developed the temple ceremonies that remain central to Mormon worship today. The Nauvoo period, from 1839 to 1846, was both the golden age and the twilight of Joseph Smith's ministry. The city grew rapidly, becoming one of the largest in Illinois, with its own university, militia, and municipal government. But with growth came increased scrutiny and opposition. Smith's introduction of plural marriage, his presidential campaign in 1844, and his increasing political power created powerful enemies. The situation reached a boiling point when Smith ordered the destruction of a critical newspaper, the Nauvoo Expositor. This act led to his arrest and imprisonment in Carthage jail. On June 27, 1844, an armed mob stormed the jail and killed Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram. The prophet was dead, but his movement would not die with him. Brigham Young, president of the Quorum of 12 Apostles, assumed leadership of the church. Under mounting pressure and facing the certainty of continued persecution, Young made one of the most momentous decisions in American religious history. He would lead the entire Mormon community west, beyond the reach of their enemies, to the Rocky Mountains. The Nauvoo Temple, though unfinished, became the site of frantic activity as the saints prepared for their exodus. Working day and night, temple workers performed thousands of endowment ceremonies and sealings for the living, knowing they might never have another temple. In February 1846, the first companies of saints began crossing the frozen Mississippi River, leaving behind their beautiful city and their magnificent temple. It was an American exodus of biblical proportions. The Mormon Pioneer Trail became one of the most significant migration routes in American history. Over 20 years, approximately 70,000 people would make this journey, many pulling handcarts for 1,300 miles across prairies, mountains, and deserts. The journey was marked by incredible hardship. Disease, starvation, exposure, and death were constant companions. The Martin and Willie Handcart companies of 1856 were caught by early winter storms, resulting in over 200 deaths. Yet they pressed on, driven by faith and the promise of Zion in the valleys of the mountains. On July 24, 1847, Brigham Young emerged from his sickbed in the lead wagon, looked out over the Salt Lake Valley, and declared, "This is the right place." Here, in this desert basin, the saints would build their kingdom of God on earth. Within days of their arrival, Brigham Young selected the site for their new temple. It would be built on the block immediately north of where he was standing, and it would be grander than anything they had built before. The Salt Lake Temple would become the crown jewel of Mormon architecture and the spiritual center of their faith. But building a temple in the desert was an enormous challenge. The nearest railroad was 1,000 miles away. Every tool, every piece of equipment had to be hauled across the plains by wagon train. Even more challenging was obtaining suitable building stone. Young insisted on the finest materials, solid granite that would last for millennia. The granite came from Little Cottonwood Canyon, 20 miles southeast of the temple site. Quarrying began in 1860, but transporting the massive blocks was an enormous undertaking. Initially, oxen pulled the stone blocks on wooden sledges, a journey that took 4 days. Later, a railroad was built specifically to transport the granite, reducing the journey to 1 day. The temple's foundation alone required 16,000 tons of stone. Each granite block was cut and fitted by hand, using techniques that had changed little since medieval times. Master craftsmen from Europe were recruited to carve the intricate decorations. The work was painstaking and dangerous. Several workers died in quarry accidents or from exposure to granite dust. The Salt Lake Temple took 40 years to complete, from 1853 to 1893. 3 generations of workers contributed to its construction. Some men began working on the temple as young adults and died before its completion, having spent their entire careers on this single project. The temple became a symbol not just of faith, but of persistence, sacrifice, and devotion. When it was finally dedicated on April 6, 1893, exactly 63 years after the church's organization, it stood as a testament to what faith could accomplish. The temple's Gothic Revival architecture was unique among American religious buildings. Its 6 spires reached toward heaven, topped with the now famous statue of the angel Moroni. The walls were 4 feet thick at the base, built to withstand earthquakes and the test of time. Inside, the finest materials were used: imported woods, hand-painted murals, and intricate carvings that took years to complete. But the Salt Lake Temple was more than an architectural marvel. It was a theological statement. Joseph Smith had taught that temples were necessary for the fullness of salvation, places where sacred ordinances could be performed that were essential for eternal life. These ordinances included baptism for the dead, endowments for the living, and sealings that bound families together for eternity. The concept of eternal families became central to Mormon theology. Unlike traditional Christianity, which taught that earthly relationships ended at death, Mormons believed that marriages and family relationships could continue in the afterlife if sealed by proper priesthood authority in the temple. This doctrine transformed how Mormons viewed death, marriage, and family relationships. As the 20th century dawned, Mormon temples began to spread beyond Utah. The church was growing internationally, and faithful members around the world needed access to temple ordinances. In 1919, the Lai Hawaii Temple was dedicated, the first temple built outside the continental United States. This began a pattern of international expansion that would accelerate throughout the century. Each new temple represented not just the growth of the church, but the global reach of Mormon doctrine and practice. The Alberta Temple in Canada, dedicated in 1923, served members across Western Canada and the northern United States. The Mesa, Arizona Temple, completed in 1927, was the largest temple built since Salt Lake City and featured beautiful gardens that became a tourist attraction. The mid-20th century saw revolutionary changes in temple construction and operation. President David O. McKay, who served as church president from 1951 to 1970, had a vision of taking temples to the people rather than requiring all members to travel to Salt Lake City. Under his leadership, temple construction accelerated dramatically. The Swiss temple, dedicated in 1955, was the first built in Europe and served members across the continent. The London Temple, dedicated in 1958, brought temple blessings to British Isles members for the first time. These international temples required significant adaptation. Different cultures, climates, and building codes necessitated new approaches to temple design and construction. Yet each maintained the essential elements that made Mormon temples unique: sacred spaces set apart for eternal ordinances. The process of temple construction became highly refined over the decades. Each temple required years of planning, from site selection to architectural design to interior finishing. Sites were chosen based on membership density, accessibility, and symbolic importance. The church developed standardized plans that could be adapted to local conditions while maintaining doctrinal consistency. Local members were often asked to contribute financially and through volunteer labor, making each temple a community effort. The dedication of a new temple became a major celebration for local Mormon communities, often featuring weeks-long open houses where non-members could tour the building before it was consecrated for sacred use. Temple architecture evolved significantly from the massive Gothic structures of the 19th century to more modern, culturally sensitive designs. The São Paulo, Brazil temple, dedicated in 1978, reflected Brazilian architectural influences while maintaining Mormon temple symbolism. The Tokyo, Japan temple, dedicated in 1980, incorporated Asian design elements and was built to withstand earthquakes. The Johannesburg, South Africa temple, dedicated in 1985, served members across the African continent and represented the church's global expansion. Each temple told the story of the local Mormon community while connecting members to the worldwide church. The ordinances performed in Mormon temples remain largely unchanged from those introduced by Joseph Smith in Nauvoo. The endowment ceremony takes participants through a symbolic journey representing humanity's progression from the Garden of Eden to the celestial kingdom. Participants make covenants with God and receive instruction about the plan of salvation. The ceremony includes symbolic clothing, ritual gestures, and sacred words that members covenant not to reveal outside the temple. This aspect of temple worship, the requirement of secrecy, has generated significant controversy and curiosity throughout Mormon history. Critics have accused the church of cult-like secrecy, while members insist that some things are too sacred to be discussed casually. Baptism for the dead remains one of the most distinctive and controversial Mormon practices. Based on Paul's reference in 1 Corinthians 15:29, Mormons believe that people who die without receiving essential ordinances can have these performed on their behalf by living proxies. This practice has led to massive genealogical research efforts as Mormons seek to identify their ancestors and perform ordinances for them. The church operates the world's largest genealogical organization, with billions of names in its databases. However, this practice has also generated significant controversy, particularly when Mormons have performed ordinances for Holocaust victims and members of other faiths without permission from their families. Temple sealings represent another unique aspect of Mormon theology. These ceremonies unite husbands and wives and bind children to parents for eternity. Unlike traditional weddings that end at death, temple sealings are believed to continue in the afterlife. This doctrine has profound implications for Mormon family life and explains the emphasis placed on family relationships within Mormon culture. However, it has also created painful situations where family members who are not temple worthy cannot attend wedding ceremonies, sometimes excluding parents from their children's weddings. The temple recommend system ensures that only worthy members can enter Mormon temples. To obtain a recommend, members must pass worthiness interviews with their local bishop and stake president. These interviews cover faith, moral conduct, church attendance, tithing payment, and adherence to church standards. The questions are standardized and include inquiries about belief in church doctrine, honesty in dealings with others, sexual purity, and loyalty to church leaders. This system creates a clear distinction between practicing and non-practicing Mormons and ensures that temple worship maintains its sacred character. The growth of Mormon temples in the late 20th and early 21st centuries has been unprecedented. President Gordon B. Hinckley, who served from 1995 to 2008, announced plans to build smaller temples to serve Mormon communities worldwide. These smaller temples, while maintaining the essential ordinances, could be built more quickly and economically than the massive temples of the past. During Hinckley's presidency, the number of operating temples more than doubled, from 47 to 124. His successor, Thomas S. Monson, continued this expansion, dedicating 26 temples during his presidency from 2008 to 2018. The current church president, Russell M. Nelson, has announced an even more ambitious temple building program. Since becoming president in 2018, he has announced over 200 new temples, more than any previous church president. His goal is to make temple worship accessible to Mormon communities worldwide, reducing the travel time required for members to attend the temple. This expansion represents not just church growth, but a fundamental commitment to making temple ordinances available to all worthy members, regardless of their geographic location. Modern temple construction incorporates advanced technology and contemporary architectural techniques, while maintaining traditional symbolism. New temples feature energy-efficient systems, earthquake-resistant construction, and beautiful gardens that serve the local community. The Rome, Italy temple, dedicated in 2019, sits near ancient Roman ruins and incorporates classical design elements while featuring modern amenities. The Durban, South Africa temple serves members across southern Africa and reflects both African architectural influences and Mormon symbolism. The impact of Mormon temples extends beyond their religious function. Temple construction often brings significant economic benefits to local communities through construction jobs, increased tourism, and ongoing maintenance needs. The beautiful gardens and visitor centers associated with many temples become community landmarks and tourist attractions. The Mesa, Arizona Temple Gardens host hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, including many non-Mormons who come to enjoy the beautiful landscaping and Easter pageants. Temple worship has also evolved with changing technology. While the essential ordinances remain unchanged, temples now use advanced audiovisual systems, computerized scheduling, and digital records to manage the thousands of ordinances performed weekly. The church has also embraced online family history research, making it easier for members to identify ancestors who need temple ordinances. Virtual reality and other technologies are being explored to enhance the temple experience while maintaining its sacred character. The global expansion of Mormon temples has required significant cultural adaptation. Temples in different countries must comply with local building codes, architectural styles, and cultural sensitivities. The Accra, Ghana temple incorporates African architectural elements, while the Hong Kong temple was designed to fit into the dense urban landscape of one of Asia's most crowded cities. Each temple reflects its local culture while maintaining the universal symbols and ordinances that define Mormon temple worship. The controversy surrounding Mormon temples continues in the modern era. Critics argue that the secrecy surrounding temple ceremonies is evidence of cult-like behavior, and that the practice of baptism for the dead violates the religious freedom of deceased individuals. The requirement that only worthy members can attend temple weddings continues to create painful family situations. Some former Mormons have published accounts of temple ceremonies, leading to legal battles over religious secrecy and intellectual property. Despite these controversies, Mormon temples remain central to the faith and practice of millions of Latter-day Saints worldwide. For believing Mormons, temples represent the highest form of worship and the pathway to eternal salvation. They are places where heaven and earth meet, where families are sealed for eternity, and where the deepest doctrines of the faith are taught and experienced. The temple recommend serves as a symbol of worthiness and commitment, while temple attendance is seen as the pinnacle of Mormon religious life. According to current statistics from 2024, there are 382 temples in various phases worldwide, with 201 currently operating, 59 under construction, and 122 announced. President Russell M. Nelson has announced over 200 new temples during his presidency, an unprecedented expansion in church history, representing a 45% increase in the total number of temples. The church's global membership exceeded 17.5 million in 2024, with record-breaking 308,000 convert baptisms, demonstrating the continuing need for temple construction worldwide. Each temple blends with the local culture while maintaining the same eternal principles that Joseph Smith established in the 1830s. The practice of baptism for the dead, based on 1 Corinthians 15:29, has now been performed for over 1.4 billion deceased individuals, the most extensive genealogical work ever undertaken by any religious organization. Modern temples feature initiatory ordinances, endowment ceremonies, and sealing ordinances designed to prepare believers for eternal families and the celestial kingdom. The temple construction process typically takes 3 to 5 years from groundbreaking to dedication, with costs ranging from $15 to $50 million, depending on size and location. Each temple requires 200 to 400 volunteer workers to operate effectively, creating significant community involvement. Temple architecture reflects regional influences while maintaining essential symbolic elements. The Rome Temple uses Italian marble and classical design elements. The Accra, Ghana Temple incorporates traditional African motifs, and the Hong Kong Temple harmonizes with the Asian urban landscape. Angel Moroni statues, which feature on over 100 temples, serve as symbols of restoration, though some newer temples do not include this feature. Showing architectural diversity and cultural sensitivity, the temple experience begins with careful preparation. Members must be interviewed by local church leaders, hold current temple recommends, and schedule appointments for most ordinances. Upon arrival, members change into white clothing symbolizing purity and equality. The temple grounds themselves are maintained as sacred spaces with beautiful gardens, fountains, and landscaping that serve both aesthetic and symbolic purposes. Looking toward the future, Mormon temple construction shows no signs of slowing. President Nelson's vision includes making temple worship accessible to members worldwide, with most members living within a reasonable distance of a temple. This expansion represents one of the most ambitious religious construction projects in modern history and demonstrates the continuing growth and global reach of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. These temples stand as monuments to faith, sacrifice, and devotion. From humble beginnings in Kirtland, Ohio, to magnificent structures on 6 continents, Mormon temples represent the global reach of a uniquely American religion. They are not just buildings of stone and glass, they are sanctuaries of faith, centers of community life, and gateways to eternity. Whether viewed as sacred spaces or mysterious fortresses, Mormon temples have undeniably left their mark on the religious landscape of the modern world, continuing to inspire devotion, curiosity, and controversy in equal measure. Speaking of historical justice and moral reckonings, if you're interested in how justice was served after one of history's darkest chapters, check out our shocking investigation into the bloody end of the Bergen-Belsen Guards: crimes, trials, and executions. Click the video on your screen now to witness how Nazi war criminals finally faced their fate. The footage and testimonies will leave you speechless,